Welcome back, Pirate Crew. It's your captain, Yeehaw Yadam, and for today's video, we've got something a little bit different. If you guys have remembered, we had a podcast a long time ago with national champion, world champion, Andrew, Duval. You love him. He's on the channel. He's a friend of the channel. But today, we're going to be continuing that podcast style with none other than Jackson Hoang. If you don't know Jackson is a fantastic card game player. On a beast in every card game that I've seen him in, and I'm honestly just gonna let him talk a little about himself, let you know what he's done, and yeah. What up, Jackson?
Hey, thanks for having me on the channel. Yeah, I mean, a little bit about myself. I started playing card games about 3 years ago when Digimon came out. I think it came out like set 5 Digimon, and then ever since then, I've been trying to dip my feet in every card games that come out, like One Piece, Battle Spirits, even Shadowverse. And yeah, I've been loving it, and I'm sad it took me so long to get into card games. They're so much fun, and you meet a lot of great people.
No way did you just say that you just started card games 3 years ago?
Yeah, growing up, I never really had time to play them with school and everything else, and it was also money was a factor. So like when you become an adult and you have money to play and time to play these things, and you get into it. Before card games, I was into mobile games a little bit. I played this kind of small mobile game called Clash Royale, kind of competitive for a while. Like I flew to like Los Angeles or Toronto and other places. But that was like my only kind of exposure to any kind of competitive gameplay.
Oh, that's awesome. So you went from competitive mobile gaming and then just to card gaming. So you said, I mean, the first question was going to be, what's your, how did you get into card gaming? What was your first card game? But I feel like you just kind of ran right through that. So you started off with Digimon, and I know you did great in Digimon. If you guys don't know, Jackson was I'm pretty sure you were the DigiFest champion here in Miami. And yep. You won a couple other events too, top to nationals. You got quite the record in Digimon, and then in One Piece. Where was the shift? Have you now been more of a One Piece focused player, or do you still kind of like float through all these other card games?
Yeah, I would say One Piece is probably my primary game. If there's any kind of schedule overlap between One Piece and other card games, I just choose One Piece. If there's a kind of break in the schedule where there's no like tournaments or anything I have to travel for, I try to pick up other card games in the meantime. So that Bandai being responsible for both One Piece and Digimon means that I don't get to play a lot of Digimon because the events always overlap. Yeah. But other card games like Shadowverse is a card game I just got into, and I think it's really fun. It just came out, I think, July. I've been trying to get into that as well, but not as seriously. That's a game where I don't care if I do well or not. It's just a really fun game. But yeah, right now, my primary focus is One Piece.
Sick. So, I mean, you didn't say anything. So what are some of your One Piece accomplishments real quick? If you can just, real quick, just shout them out.
Yeah, so I won one of the Treasure Cups in Las Vegas in March. I've won the Treasure Cup at Gen Con in Annapolis, I think, a month ago. And other than that, I have a lot of tops and a lot of top 16s or top 8s. And the prize card, which is probably most sought after, is the Serial Luffy, and I've won 7 of those.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you might be the most decorated One Piece player with 7 Luffys. I'm not necessarily sure. If anyone knows of anyone with more than 7 Luffys, yeah, feel free to leave it in the comment section. That'd be very
7 earned Luffys. I don't know. Somebody might have bought out like 8 of them or something.
Well, that they won. Yeah, of course. So then let's talk a little bit about One Piece, right? So we're here. We're in set 3. We're on the cusp of set 4 in Kingdoms of Intrigue. How do you feel about set 3?
Set 3 or set 4?
Well, I'm gonna start with set 3, and then we're gonna talk a little about set 4. How did you feel? Because I know set 2, set 1 was an expanse, right? We had Kid very dominant in the format, but there was a lot of random little things. Set 2 felt very dominated by one color, and that continued to feel that way in set 3. So, how did you feel about adapting from that change?
Yeah, so I think there didn't change much between set 2 and set 3. Red was still a color dominated. Maybe the other colors got a little bit glimpse of a hope, but in the end, it was still dominated by red. And I honestly find myself playing whatever color is good. So I don't see myself as a red player or blue player, whatever. Whatever is good, I play it. That's why I played Croc in the starter deck format. I played Kid, of course, set 1, and then red until now. So until another color becomes the best color, I'm going to play that. So it wasn't really like a much of a change between set 2 and 3, and it might be a little unfun for people, especially people who didn't want to pick up red, because they would just get overrun by like 8 red decks in the tournament.
Oh, of course. I mean, I think that's a very interesting distinction that you made. You're not like a lot of people say, like, I'm a blue main or a purple main, and I don't necessarily think in a competitive format that matters too much. You have to be adaptable, flexible to whatever the meta may be, and then kind of shift towards that. So I guess one of my questions is, since you've gotten so much accolade in these tournaments and stuff like that. What is some advice you can give people that, in terms of, besides like practice forehead, like in terms of what deck to take to a tournament? Do you feel like you have to be comfortable on a deck, or do you think you have to play the best deck? What would you say?
I would say if you're trying to be as competitive as possible and you want to reach the pinnacle, really, is to obviously identify what the best deck is and then practice that a lot. If you're kind of trying to play for, to make sure you don't get burned out by playing, just red all the time, then you can pick up your favorite deck and then do well with it. I've seen a lot of players who are like Lucci mains or like Whitebeard main. I mean, Whitebeard is one of the best colors, but I've seen other people who are different color mains, but they've stuck with since like it came out, and then they've done really well with it. So you don't need to necessarily just play the best deck to do well. You can easily become the best of your own color, which is a nice distinction as well, because I can name off like the top of my head who I think like, the best black players or black color players are.
No, I think that's something that's really cool about this game. You see it all the time. Like this particular guy, he's really good on black. He consistently tops on black or blue or whatever, And funnily enough, once you go to these in-person events, obviously I don't do a lot of online, but in the in-person events, you start seeing the same faces, the familiar people traveling, and you know what they're on before you even play the tournament. Like that guy's playing Duffy or whatever.
Right.
So it's really cool. But as you said, you don't necessarily have to, play the best deck, but you have to identify it, and your deck kind of has to be able to play around it, right? At least.
Exactly.
All right, cool. So moving on from then set 3, which has been like singular color dominated, how do you feel about set 4 if you've played any games of it?
So I played a little bit of it. Ever since set 3 ended, I got a little time to kind of practice it with proxies and everything. And I think set 4 is going to be the biggest shift in One Piece so far, just in terms of power of the colors and in terms of kind of skill checks. I think set 4 becomes a lot slower, and then it's common to see games go on for like 10 to 20 turns. And the more turns there are, the more opportunities there are to misplay. In previous sets, it would be common to finish within like 5 to 10 turns, and then you're only making 5 to 10 moves, so you might not misplay as much. But in a longer drawn out game, you can misplay more. And I think that the strength of all the colors are increased a lot, where they can compete with red. I think the most important thing in set 4 will be like your matchups. You can beat some decks and lose to some decks, and I think a lot of decks have that kind of game plan where it's like, oh, I can beat Zoro, but I lose this, so I just have to hope I don't go against this. So I think set 4 will be a lot of matchup dependent tournament runs. So if you want to do well in a tournament, you just have to hope you see your good matchups.
So that's something that I have felt like for a little bit, that you kind of have to run quote unquote clean, right? You have to, there are some matchups that if you make your deck or you gear your deck to like beat this matchup, you weaken it to another matchup, right? And if you like go overboard in making your deck mid versus both, then really what are you doing? So I've fallen under the idea personally where I'm like, you know what? This is what my deck loses to if I run into it unlucky.
Yeah, sometimes you have to accept the loss. Like, okay, I hope I only get that one matchup throughout my whole entire tournament. I'm just gonna win the rest of the 8. Sometimes like you're gonna have tournament runs where you see like that your worst matchup 3 games, the first 3 rounds or something, and then you're just gonna accept like, okay, I wasn't meant to win this tournament.
Of course, and that's something and that's unfortunate, right? But I think what I'm trying to allude to with what I'm saying here, because that's something we can accept. Like, I'll take an 80-20 on this matchup. Yeah, I can potentially win it, but it's really, really unlikely or unfavorable. But the idea is, how can we fix that? Does it matter? Do we even care to fix it, or what do you think?
I think learning how to play out of your bad matchups is one of the skills that separate like the good players from bad players. I think a quote I really like is, good players win the matchups they're supposed to, and then great players win the matchups they're not supposed to. So that could be like going against a really bad matchup, or going against a game where your opponent outdraws you or you're unfavored. Because good players will go like 6-3, 7-2, and they'll win all the ones their matchups are supposed to win and lose all the ones they're supposed to lose. But if you want to go like 8-1 or 9-0, you have to win some matchups where you were meant to lose. I think in all of my tournament runs where I've gone undefeated, there were a couple rounds where I look back after the match, I was like, I should have lost that. Like, my opponent drew better than me, or I got lucky at a life or something. But like, those are the matchups that you had to learn how to win coming out of a hole.
No, of course. And that's something that is oftentimes really hard. I guess there's like a form of tilt that also happens, right? Because like you're playing the matchup and you're not drawing well, and then your opponent starts dropping the cards that they need to win, and you're like, damn, one Whitebeard? Okay. Ooh, the second one. You start getting like a little frustrated, and maybe you start making more misplays. But that's a very interesting phrase. I don't think I've ever heard that good player, great player reference, but I like that.
I made it up on the spot.
Oh,
somebody messaged something on Twitter, and then I replied to them like, oh yeah, that quote, like that makes a lot of sense to me. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick with it.
No, it's a really good quote. And I guess what the question was maybe more like trying to push was, how can Bandai possibly, like, as a player, you can do your best to prepare for your matchups, right? I think it's important when it comes to tournament runs out. Preparation is key, right? You got to know your deck inside out. What do you expect other people to play? And you got to know all those matchups, even the weird ones, right? But besides that, like, since the game is it's a best of one, is there any way that Bandai can possibly influence it and be like, well, maybe these 80-20 matchups, if we make it a best of 3, I don't know. I'm just trying to see. Do you think there's any other way besides like knowing your strength that we can go ahead and like do that?
Yeah, I think the best of 3 is something that like a lot of players really want, because in the best of 3, consistency rules. So if you get lucky 1 out of 3 games, that's fine. You have 2 other games to back it up. One other thing that I thought was interesting in another game, I think to do this in DBZ, was having some kind of sideboard, like a pre-side, even in a best of 1. So I'll see your leader, you see my leader, we can side in cards that we have in our sideboard for this matchup or something. Because there are some cards that like, or colors where you want to play attacking it every deck to make sure you have a good all-around matchup, but then that makes you not have as good matchup as you want. So if I'm playing blue, I have specific decks for against Zoro or something, but that Zoro tech might not be good against Whitebeard or something. Correct. So it'd be cool if they kind of implement some kind of pre-sideboard. I've never played with it because I've never played DBZ, but I thought that'd be an interesting kind of change, or like a trial. I'd be interested to see how that would go. So
I have a lot of friends, obviously, that come from the DBZ background. I never played the game, but they know how to do the pre-sideboard, and I think that's a really interesting way, because moving into this next set in set 4, I think you kind of talked about it. The games go a little bit longer, right? And it's going to be a stamina tester. So it's going to be very tough to make it really best, 2 out of 3 when we're playing like queen versus queen matchups. That's just, my goodness.
You're going to go for like an hour and a half long matches if you try to do best of 3 in set 4.
Yeah, correct. So maybe one way to mitigate that would be that pre-side. And I don't know how Bandai would implement it, but I do like that idea. That I know that they tried it in DBS, and maybe they can implement it in One Piece. I think now we have enough variety and card pool that we can actually make a sideboard, and it's not just like super red favored, right? Because red had all the good side cards.
If we had pre-sideboards, like black can play like the 9-cost Shanks that can just win you the game.
Yeah, specifically on some matchups, like maybe this is a good matchup for Isho, or maybe this is a good matchup for the I'm blanking out, Kuzan, 10-drop Kuzan, right? Because like they don't usually play both, but now you're like, oh, in this matchup, this one's a little bit better. So that's really cool that not only black can do that, red, I mean, I think every color to some extent can do that, right?
Exactly.
So looking at set 4, I know you're talking about the games go a little bit longer. What are you excited to play set 4? Or like, what do you think might be the decks to beat?
I'll answer your latter question first. So the decks to beat, I think, will probably be some combination of Law and Whitebeard, which are probably still tier 1. And then as for decks that I didn't consider tier 1 before, but now consider tier 1, I would say Katakuri, Rebecca, and then some other decks that kind of just miss a threshold, like Crocodile, Blue-Purple, or Purple-Green Doflamingo, Zoro, Nami. But the deck that I'm most excited to play is Rebecca for sure. I've watched a lot of gameplay of it, and there's a lot of intricate like moves or turns where you have to allocate 3 down to this, 1 down to that, and then seems like very combo heavy, which I love and I always like to play. That's why I was always a Nami player, and just the combo heavy aspect and the high skill ceiling of it made me really want to pick up the deck, even if it's not the best.
No, I think the deck is really what's the word that I'm looking for? It's very testing, right? As a player, as the more games you get on it, obviously the better you're going to be at it. I tried to make a video about it recently, so obviously that's going to come out later. But the beginning games that I had, I was doing terribly, like very hard to win a game. And then after I put some more practice into it, it's a very non-forgiving deck, which is cool, right? It's a good deck that's also, for good players, which is nice. Really, really solid.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot to pick up. I remember in the beginning, I was like decking out, or I trashed all my Luffy's, or there's definitely a learning curve to it. But I think there's so much hours that you can, like, maybe it's like the highest skill ceiling deck just because there's so many lines of play you can do with it.
Yeah, rewarding was the word I was looking for, and it finally came in as a very rewarding deck. So one thing that has been on my mind, and I don't know if you've thought about this, because you did mention Whitebeard and Law being the best decks, and I do think that although we get a new set and the meta might change a little, it really won't change much, right? Those decks are very engraved, right? They've been played for so long that people know the ins and outs, and they're very good, and the card quality is very high in those decks. Do you think that Bandai will lift the restrictions currently on in the West, and or will they add on to it?
Right. So this is like the question that everybody's been thinking about, like, oh, are they gonna restrict more cards? They're gonna lift restrictions. So I can give an opinion, but that's just like my personal opinion. I think
it's just
part
opinion
of
based.
yeah, I think part of the ban list will stay restricted. I think Radical Beam for one is probably the most problematic card. As for like Whitebeard and Marco, like they are really strong and they do make the Whitebeard leader pretty strong. So I wouldn't see or mind seeing them stay in the ban list too. But I think one of those two or maybe both will get lifted. But I think Radical Beam would be a card that will probably stay banned. As for other cards to get banned, I think probably the most problematic one right now is probably the Dawn. It just enables red as a color so much. It's probably the only color where you get a searcher that can find like another searcher body. Like it would be crazy if like brand new could search expand them in the black color or something.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah. Exactly, but red's the only color that can kind of generate that infinite resource value, and it also has like cards like Uta, which can even recycle the searcher. So it has like infinite resource generation. So I think the Dawn is a card that had the potential to be put on the ban list. Other than that, like there are stuff that I could or want to see errata. Like the Zoro leader, I think will always be a problem if we ever get problematic red cards. I think Zoro leader will always be the thing. I think even now set 5, it's still a thing. Even in set 4, it's a thing, even though it's kind of skipping a set because the Alabasta red cards aren't that great, but it's still a great leader.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And that, yeah, I would like to see like maybe the Whitebeard and Law leaders get some kind of errata because they're going to be long-standing parts of the meta until the meta either is hard equipped to counter it or like some other thing that is really good against it, like how Rebecca is good into Law.
Yeah, something crazy needs to happen for there like to force a change, right? If not, it is what it is. Or like restrictions, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So I agree. Radical Beam is a crazy, crazy card, but have you ever read Blast Breath?
Oh yeah, I have, and it's like a purple Radical Beam. But the Dawn minus is really like brutal in that games don't last that long. Maybe now since games take longer to finish, a Blast Breath would just be just as bad. But until we reach that point, maybe with the purple Luffy in set 5, Blast Breath is after that.
Yeah, that's why every time I see cards that are like 1 drop, give 4k counter, right? Very similar to Radical Beams. I'm starting to think like, what can this do? Like maybe Guard Point is a fine card, right? 1 for 3, it might be considered fine. You have in yellow, you have the arrow that came in the structure deck. I don't really know if any other color has a 1 for 3 besides those two.
Not a 1 for 3, but yellow does get a 1 for 4 as well in set 5. The one where you're 2 or less life or your opponent's 2 or less life, it's a 4k counter.
Yeah, so they keep printing these like pseudo Radical Beams, which makes me concerned on like how they're going to approach like what the limited and restrictions are going to be. But I know I have a weird take on the restriction list. I know that here in the West, in the East, we didn't really have a restriction, right? And I think it's interesting to have a distinction between the two formats. But I also think that might cause some issues moving into like Worlds, and moving forward. So I really don't know how Bandai's going to approach it. But I like the idea of like looking at these cards and then just thinking, what can we do about them?
Yeah, or like just listening to like players because we definitely have a very vocal community. So maybe if they keep their ears open or something, they'll see what cards are most problematic.
No, for sure. I'm pretty sure they're listening because they did that restriction list so quickly as compared to like just being radio silent and not doing anything. So I thought that was really nice. They're obviously very in tune with the community, which I think is very, very cool. And I want to talk about the Dawn real quick. That card is literally in every red deck of all time. I know you mentioned it. Like you're playing Luffy. Yep. You're playing the Dawn and the Bunch. You're playing Ace, the Dawn and the Bunch. And Zoro, it's all in every deck. That card is absurd.
Right. I've even testing it in White here just because it's so crazy.
Like it just finds you. You're playing Otama probably because that card's crazy. Makino, oh my god, it's fantastic. And then Searcher of your choice. It's absurd.
Yeah, like red gets so many good things. Like even their 1 cost, like or 2Ks have really good value. Like Makino and Otama by themselves are really good, even though they're not 2Ks. So I don't know. They just gave red everything.
That's something I've been meaning. I know it's turning into like a little bit of a red ramp, but man, the 2Ks in red are just a little bit above the 2Ks of the rest of the decks. I think blue finally got some really good 2Ks, though the Animal Kingdom Sasaki is really good. Kaya is a good one. But like other than that, like green, name one green good 2K that's not Izo.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I was just gonna say Izo.
That's it. Scratchman up who? Question mark?
Yeah, I think I've played that card like maybe twice in my life.
Yeah, you played it twice and you're like, this was a mistake both times.
It was just like, okay, now I have something to bounce back with my 5 cost law.
Exactly. All right, cool. So then, I mean, we talked a little bit about set 4. I know you mentioned Nami. Just you kind of like talked a little about how you enjoy playing Nami and how you're like, oh, these games might go a little longer. And there are some decks that you said maybe in the 1.5 range. When I think you mentioned Croc, Nami, and the blue, green, purple Doflamingo, and it's really interesting because I have those decks in the same exact spot in my mind for like a tier list. How do you feel about Nami? Because if Law and Whitebeard do somehow have to adapt to this weird new meta, do you think Nami might actually have a spot at like a tier 1 slot?
Oh yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see Nami topping a lot more than it in set 3. Even though, like, yeah, you get one new card in the 2K counter Apis, I think the name is.
Yeah, it's literally that.
Yeah, it's more like I might not even see people play that. It's more that the format shifts into a much slower format. So now you can play Nami, hope you draw into some of the slow decks like Queen or Blue Croc, and then hope that you face your worst matchup like Law and Whitebeard, like maybe once or twice a tournament, maybe take those losses or maybe get lucky in those, and then just hope you draw into the slower decks for the rest of the tournament. So I think it's really interesting how Nami automatically becomes a meta contender just because the format changes.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. That's something that I've been like, it's on the back of my mind. I'm like, well, this format does feel a little slower. Does that mean Nami's just like cracked? Can Queen even beat Nami? I'm not.
It's very hard. It's extremely hard.
Sure. It seems very, very difficult. Yeah. But yeah. So one last thing, I guess I'll just ask you one more question before I let you go. How do you feel about the current format for the upcoming Nationals? Because I know you're going to be coming for Nationals. What do you think? I think it's expected to be set 5. Mm-hmm. I think you think it's set 5, right?
I think it's set 5 because 5 comes in December, I think, and then I think that's the last set before Nationals.
Cool. So then, how are you feeling about that, as well as the fact I think it's official that Bandai basically said pick a game, you only get to do that Nationals. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so in terms of like Bandai having all their Nationals at one point, it kind of like was a damper because I wanted to play Digimon and maybe potentially Battle Spirits, but now I have to pick and choose, and obviously I'm going to choose One Piece because it's the game that I'm prioritizing right now. But that's just something that I have to deal with. I do get a 2-round bye because of the new invite thing, so maybe I'll go hang out at the Digimon side for like the first 2 rounds just to play or something. But in terms of the format, I haven't played much. I have seen a lot of the cards already and seen a lot of the crazy things to do, like the new Enel leader basically reviving off One Dawn seems like it's the ultra Zoro counter, because Zoro, like it's rare for Zoro to get you down more than 0. They just get you down to 0, and then if Enel keeps coming back, then it's gonna be hard. But I think set 5, I've heard pretty like kind of like dire things about it in that it becomes a little bit less fun. But I'll give it a chance. Like I haven't played it yet, so I can't say that it's a bad format or anything. But I've given my eyes open and ears open just to see how Japan is reacting to the set 5 meta, and then I'll be able to make a decision after like watch some gameplay or whatever. But I'm hoping like all the new stuff like will open up lines of play where every color will be viable and not just red is the strongest or anything else.
No, I think that's what most of the player base just wants. They just want to make sure that they can play whichever color they want. They're not limited into a competitive setting that's just red based, which is understandable. I completely get it. As a competitive player, you want to play the best deck. But let's say you really like playing Kaido. You're like, Kaido's my favorite character in the show, and I can't play him since super pre-release. Like that kind of sucks. So
yeah.
But yeah, so thank you so much for being on the channel. Thank you so much for doing this little interview. I want to give you this opportunity to do a little shout out of your own. Any shout outs that you have, go ahead and plug them in.
Yeah, for sure. First, shout out to my playtesting group and friends at the Grand Line. We're just a bunch of guys like just enjoy talking about the game, or even not about the game, like just about life, whatever. We gotta keep each other grounded. Like if we see somebody do well, we'll want to do well, and we keep each other like not burned out, where we just don't talk about the game 24/7. We just check to see how each other doing in life. In terms of my socials, I have a Twitter at ClydeTCG, so just twitter.com/ClydeTCG. And I also have a Patreon where I upload articles, tier lists, deck profiles, and just normal experiments like fundamentals or anything, just to help other people get better at the game. And that's going to be at patreon.com/ClydeTCG as well. And yeah, shout out to you for hosting this, and all the content creators creating all the content for the One Piece community, just to make sure that we improve our game or stay into the game, because I love watching all the content creators.
Oh, thank you so much. And obviously go check out his Patreon if you guys want to get some more experience from such a professional player. And So thank you guys for, if you got it to this point in the video, make sure to hit a like. If you have any comments or something you want to leave in the comment section, anything you want to tell Jackson or anything you want to just talk about in this format in general, just go ahead and leave a comment. And as always, if you're enjoying this One Piece trading card game content, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.